to week 8 of full summer of code and GSoC. I guess this is wrong here. This should be Drupal. Oh, funny mistake. But yeah, let's dive deep into it. That is something which is super useful. Week 8 has been quite rewarding, and we got quite a bit of a final structure of our code that we have here. So we did quite a lot of work. We added service test files, we added markdown support. We tested how recipes further we can take the project further if we do want to. So let us dive deep into it one by one. So first, we have testing our application. As last we discussed, we had written unit test cases, which are the fastest, but they have no connection to the database or the browser. They are purely isolated plugins. This week, we started exploring into kernel test cases for service files. They do require database connection, and they are also pretty fast, but they still don't interact with the browser. That is exactly why they're the fastest. So we created a bunch of kernel tests. Now, how do you refine kernel tests? They are basically PHP unit integrations with a lightweight minimal version of Drupal environment. That is why kernel rather than a full install size, something that the functional JavaScript leverages. They are mainly used to test our subsystems like our APIs, primarily the databases and our services. The goal for writing these test cases was simply to test all the different possible combinations we have so that we can keep our application safe and secure. So some of the things that are caveats and some important things of kernel test cases that we must declare all of the modules that we are using in a module array. So let me show you that. Where are our kernel test cases? Okay, so like you can see, we have to include everything in a module array, AI recipe generator, AI, and systems. So these are all the modules that are used in the test cases, which provide a fantastic cover. And this is something that we need to write. You always have to write the namespace to figure it out. So it gives a path for the reader to read, hey, that this is test case and this is something that we need to treat it as a test case. And more or less, the code is a bit of self-explanatory when you start writing test cases. And we have mocked quite a few things. Apart from that, this does write to real data into tables and retrieve real services. Instead of writing dozen fragile mocks that we do not want. Apart from that, historically, kernel tests were mainly for just backend APIs. But with recent Drupal additions, they allow kernel to make HTTP requests instead of spinning the browser, which is a really cool way when we want a much faster response without going into JavaScript code. Three cases where you should not use kernel tests, then you want when a pure unit test will work and you can easily mock all the dependencies, or when you need to submit test form or complex UI interactions, you are better off with functional tests in that case. And the functionality behaves differently depending on the active front end team. Even that is one case where you should not use a kernel test. So this was more about kernel testing. So we had three different test cases: the AI service test, the benchmark dashboard tests. While began, you see everyone will have these modules in place, and the recipe storage test, which will also have these modules in place. So pretty useful in that case. So this is more or less everything we have covered about testing till now. And follow up the journey for more kind of test cases that we are going to do. We are going to maybe cover functional tests and functional Java scripts as and when the requirement arises. Now let us understand recipes. Recipes are super useful. That is basically the core of a project. Unlike modules, they are just one-way street. Once you apply a recipe, it dumps the configuration. You cannot uninstall it. There is no idempotency. You can safely run the same recipe multiple times. It will simply skip the configuration. It has a direct modification as and since there is no install, if any errors arise, it will break the application. So your recipe needs to be correct. It cannot be a wrong recipe. The while running the recipe, while I was trying to run a recipe, I did run across a few problems. So the best way to run a recipe that I found, which works for me, is you do dget if you are running on a WSL, you do drush recipe, and wherever your recipe is stored. Now, this index comes into place because this is where we are storing our recipes in the morning. So if we go to chat, let's say if I say explain this recipe, this should pop a recipe for us. It is loading quite a bit. Let's give it time. Something else. Let's see. If it does load, so then we'll cover up the rest of things. This is basically the path where it is stored. That is why we have done var www.html recipes. Recipes is a folder and our recipe name. Most recipes will by default be named recipe.yml. That is best thing. But since we talked about that recipes is a one-way street, there are certain things that we can do when things go wrong. We can have database snapshots to basically take a picture of how our database was, a configuration rollback that overwrites the database to complete YAML files. And lastly, we can always have the manual reversal. We can read it and understand. We can read it and understand it. That is why the manual reversal is basically understanding what your recipe is doing and manually reverting the changes. This is, I mean, database and config can help you to a certain extent, but the manual reversal is a short, foolproof way because you are understanding it yourself. But a project aims at reducing this. You shouldn't come at this stage. The recipe should work and deliver what you want in the first go. So that is our aim towards having recipes. But it is better safe than sorry, so you should know these methods. Now we can, in order to test them, we should apply a recipe. A good practice is to apply a recipe to a fresh Drupal install. You can use a minimal profile for that, taking snapshot and differences, and using automated each test cases that spin up headless instances, applying the recipe and programmatically verifying status, which is good. And now coming back to the UI changes, but for that, let's say if this has loaded. Yeah. So now this has loaded. So let me show you what that var meant. If we just say save into folder, yeah. So what it showed is var www.html web recipes, custom recipes. This is basically your, so you just copy this and you match it to here. You just need to replace this part with that part and you can apply your recipe. Simple, right? So that makes it. You have the Drupal AI recipe generator. Now, coming back to our final UI changes that we did, we added a bit of markdown support. Now, as you can see, there's a beautiful markdown here. Initially, it was not that good. If you have seen my earlier blogs, it didn't used to make it bold or something like that, but now it does. This is because we install another dependency for that. The dependency is the lead form mark. If we just search around this, it will spit, yeah, PHP lead. You can read more about this, the lead common mark. It is a pretty useful one. It is used by Laravel with Drupal and a lot of other things. And that is why we chose to use this. And that's how we refactor the background. Second is the badge status. Now, earlier, everything used to be the same. But now if I just mess up something like deleted it, right, something like this, it should probably throw me an error and it should probably changes. It does say YAML invalid, but still these colors need to change. I did fix that, I guess, following a commit, it must have reverted back. Let's just fix these changes quick after this video. After that, as you can see, we saved the path and we are also having a zip export. We have kept this button even though it says remote because in our discussion, sometimes it did not make sense to have that button as storing a recipe and giving an export is essentially the same thing. When you export, you give the user the power to store where the recipe they want to store, whereas having this button stores it in a predefined location that is as per the application's convenience, which may not be what the user wants. So rather than which I eventually decided is rather than having the button removed, we could actually have a separate instance and give the user choice whether they want to export or have save it in the folder that is predefined. We also had a couple of UI fixes. Now you can see this page does not move horizontally, just vertically. Earlier it used to move even horizontally when we used to load a recipe. And the last changes is the chat UI, which was earlier not that good. We have added the UI better and have added the bubbles and everything that is for more proper. So this is all about the changes that we have done this time. Thanks for reading this and catch you up in week 9.